After they had eaten, the young man who had taken care of their horses came to lead the way to the border. They bade farewell to those they had gotten closest to in this short time and followed the man. Upon entering the forest, their guide disappeared for a moment, only to appear again in the form of a black wolf. Merolias, still in the form of a raven, followed them from branch to branch, before finally landing on Melissa's shoulder to be carried. Dean found himself walking next to Nathaniel once again, a bit further behind his fiancée, who was accompanied by Raven and Wolf. "What are you going to do after this?" the older man whispered, still looking ahead. Dean was a bit surprised. His mind had been fixed on the task at hand since they had met Merolias. He hadn't had the time nor will to think about the future. "I don't really know," the young man muttered with uncertainty. "Carry on my father's legacy, I guess. Have a family." A faint smile appeared on Nate's face at the suggestion. It was a rather sad smile, full of nostalgia. Dean assumed his friend remembered something from his past. It dawned on him that the old soldier would be on his own once their adventure was done. "You could stay with us," Dean suggested, hoping to sound casual. "What, me?" Nathaniel replied in an astonished voice, showing once again the boyish smile. "Among the rich and wealthy?" "What?" Dean teased, faking his friend's accent. "It ain't right." Nathaniel laughed at the failed attempt to mimic him before growing serious again. "I ain't good company. And living in a big city. Melissa has family in Ireland. Perhaps we could find a nice place for you there. Somewhere in the countryside." The older man stopped dead before asking, obviously not being able to fathom what Dean was implying. "What, you mean a farm?" "Yes," the man confirmed. Nathaniel looked at him, moonlight reflected in his glistening eyes. He must have been afraid of being too vulnerable, for he quickly turned his head to wipe the tears away. When he answered, his voice sounded strangely weary. "I ain't worth the trouble, Dean, but I do appreciate it. I'd like to settle down." Dean knew they had reached their destination when a river came into view. Towards the mountain on the other side, it parted into two branches, one flowing back into the thick forest. The other branch led into a cave inside the wall of rock. Their guide sat down and cocked his head, as if asking if they still needed him. "Thank you." Dean went forward to pat the wolf's head. "Would you look after our horses until we come back for them?" A confirmative wink was the answer before the werewolf vanished between the undergrowth. "What now?" Dean asked in a low voice, afraid to disturb someone or something. A soft fog hung over the watery surface. No sound seemed to be carried to the river with the ghostly atmosphere. "Just wait," Merolias replied, still in his raven disguise. A soft moaning seemed to come from the direction of the cave. Dean strained his eyes to see through the growing fog. A figure approached them steadily without making a noise. It turned out to be a boat. A very thin, tall man stood at the bow. He was clothed in a dark torn cloak. In his hands was his ferryman's pole. The hood was drawn over the head, concealing their host's features. As if directed by invisible forces, the vessel stopped in front of them at the shore. It was as ghostly as its sailor, demanding respect and humility. It was entirely made of black wood. At the bow, the skeleton of a serpent emerged from the wood. The head looked ahead, staring right at the four friends with its empty sockets and bared teeth. "You are not dead," a croaky voice uttered from the cloak's shadow. "Nor are you dying." Shaking his head in a slow motion, the ferryman asked, "Why have you come? Where are you bound?" "We want to the Reaper's lair," Dean answered firmly. He wasn't sure how to address the entity or if it could be angered. For a moment the figure said nothing. Then it stretched out its hand, which was so thin Dean almost believed it to be nothing but bones. Merlice plucked 3 ancient-looking coins from out of his plumage. With an unnatural loud clinking sound, he dropped them into Melissa's hand. She then put them into the pale hand of the sailor. Shaking his hand, listening to the clinking coins, the entity stretched out his hand again. "No cheating, Merlice," came the stern voice of someone realizing he was about to be swindled. "I'm not!" The demon spread his wings like a human would his arms in defense. The ferryman only kept his hand stretched out, saying nothing more. "Fine." Merlice sighed. Reluctantly he took another coin and handed it over to the blind man. "I thought the geezer is blind," he muttered when they entered the boat. "Blind, not deaf," came the short response. "How is it, by the way, Sharon? The last time I saw you, you were carrying Greeks over Styx." Merlice chattered in his usual careless manner. Slowly but at a steady pace, the boat entered the cave. It took a while before the ferryman answered. "When humans stop believing, their gods lose their place, their function." The voice was as emotionless as death itself, yet Dean thought to hear a hint of sadness. "Death gave me a purpose, and the people here still believe in traditions where I have a place." In the cave, pitch-black darkness ruled, and soon Dean gave up on trying to see. Instead, he enjoyed the clean air and the silence. Not long after entering the mountain, 2 tunnels appeared in front of them. A grey shimmer broke through the darkness right in front of them, faintly illuminating the cave, while the tunnel to the left showed utter darkness. Sharon did not steer the ship to the side, but followed the path ahead. Thick white mist surrounded them, making it impossible for Dean to even see his own hands, nor the water beneath or the closed cave walls to the side. A second later, the mist vanished, revealing a bluish-black sky with neither clouds nor stars. Only a moon hung ghostly over the landscape. Ahead was the shore, revealing a grassy area. Eerie mists covered the sky and land to the left. Skulls and skeletons of human and beast emerged just to disappear again. Empty eyes with long monstrous teeth gazed upon them before turning to smoke. Some faces showed only eyes and a mouth, contorted in grief or torment, as if the souls of the dead were trying to cry out in silence. The water beneath was as crystal clear and black as the sky. Hadn't he known it to be water, Dean might have confused it with the blackness above. Another twisted human skull emerged, this time with an attached ribcage, the soulless face showing nothing but pure agony. "What are they?" Dean muttered to himself, forgetting Sharon's exceptional hearing. "Those are the ones who tried to cheat death. Those who ran, clinging to life. They couldn't let go. Now they can't move on." With a soft, noiseless thud, the boat stopped and the 4 companions got off the vessel. "Was nice seeing you, mate. Hold your head up, you're doing us a great favor," the Raven said before the blind ferryman turned his boat around to disappear inside the mists again. They went along the shoreline for a while until the slope was soft enough for them to move farther away from the water. The rest of the realm turned out to be pretty much the same everywhere. Bushes and grass covered the ground, mingled with different weeds and herbs. The only trees they encountered were bare and black as if a lightning had struck them. The moon's light bathed the place in a spectral light, illuminating it enough for a man to see without effort, and yet giving one the feeling of gloomy darkness. Time seemed to be non-existent, for the moon never moved nor set, although they must have spent hours walking through Death's home. In the middle of nowhere they suddenly found a richly laid table. Roasted chicken, fine wine, cheese, grapes, everything one might desire was represented. Seeing how Nathaniel skillfully managed to steal something from the table, Dean quickly took his hand. "Don't." Nathaniel cast him a confused look, but let the grape fall to the ground where it turned to grass. You eat from the feast of the dead, you can leave nevermore. His friends seemed to be ashamed of succumbing to his lesser instincts, yet he said nothing, he only averted his eyes and followed Dean's lead. I have to say, you are a very sharp young man, Dean. Death was sitting on the chair at the table's front side, the pupils almost as big as his eye sockets, with something that might have been acknowledgement. You know, I didn't think you would really do it. Death got up, stepping closer to Dean. Not after that. He poked the spot of Dean's ear with the end of his cane. Dean stepped instinctively back as the dull ache at the back of his head threatened to flare up. What is he talking about, Dean? Melissa cut in. Nothing. Dean looked away from the woman's eyes, afraid he might end up telling her. And you? Death turned to Nathaniel, who still stood close to the table and went visibly rigid. The older man didn't flinch, but Dean sensed his discomfort concerning the situation. Dean remembered the penetrating stare with which Death had studied him the first time. You, I remember, the entity uttered, visibly fascinated. I saw you often in the battle's haze. Nathaniel's face took on a guarded expression at the mention of his past. I must admit, I look forward to the day when I reap you, young man. Dean found it a bit comical how Death regarded the cowboy as a young man, but to an entity as ancient as him, probably almost everyone was a child. Death didn't speak with malice, more with sincere respect, perhaps even admiration. Nathaniel seemed to be unsure of how to react and just remained silent. Too bad Dean prevented you from eating. I would have liked some company. Don't you have enough company over there? With the hint of what probably was supposed to be a confident smile, the older man motioned with his head to the mist of tormented souls. Death only turned away in disgust. These poor souls are not company, and when I come for you someday, you don't have to fear such a fate. Turning away from them, Death walked back to the table. It will be quite painless, you'll see. He added as if they were talking about nothing special. As mysteriously as he had appeared, Death vanished again. Let's get out of here before he has a break from reaping again. Merelias urged them, his voice indicating a shiver. They journeyed farther inland, where they found a great monolith. Like the table, it was standing in the middle of nowhere without any rhyme or reason. At the rock's foot, a thick bundle of strange-looking plants was growing. They were not much bigger than a shamrock. The thick stem supported 2 leaves without a definitive form and a blossom. A strange mint-green glow came from it, as if it itself was a ghost of some kind. The sight alone gave Dean a strangely otherworldly feeling. Is that Death's herb? Merelias confirmed. What does it do? Dean asked, plucking 2 of the glowing plants. A tingling sensation made itself known on his skin where he touched the plant. He took a small cloth from his pocket and wrapped it around it. You mean besides being part of the spell? I don't really know. Death might, but I don't want to sit around and wait for him to come back. Fair enough, Dean replied as they made their way back to the lake. They had almost reached the mirror-like water when something shot past Melissa's head with lightning speed. Only when Merelias uttered a startled call and turned into his human form, Dean realized the danger they had found themselves in. Behind them, at the slope's edge, a group of people was standing. One held a bow, the others wielded swords. How can demons be here, in the Reaper's lair? Dean exclaimed, shocked, as he shielded Melissa. Merelias caught a second arrow, breaking it in 2 by clenching his fist. The realms are not divided by walls. There are small passages connecting them. Heaven banished us, and the mortal plane is protected by magic, but this realm is everywhere and nowhere. It exists in the chaos held in place by Death's power alone. Every powerful entity can enter it. Dean took the piece of chalk from his pocket, but Merelias snatched it from his hand. No, Dean, you have to stay alive. But Dean tried to argue, but the demon's tone tolerated no objections. "No, take Melissa and get to Sharon." Turning to the foes behind them, Marilis took the two swords, which he kept somewhere beneath his clothes. "Nate, can you use a sword?" "I used a saber before. How big can the difference be?" "Good man." Throwing Nathaniel one of the blades, the demon charged. Not waiting for an invitation, the former soldier followed. "I can't leave them," Dean pleaded, but Melissa dragged him onward. The ferryman's boat made its way across the water in the typical steady fashion. Dean peeked over his shoulder to see one demon lying on the ground and another being strangled by Marilis. Nathaniel was quite effective with the blade, his coat floating in the air as he performed different maneuvers. With respect, the young man remarked that their friend fought like the devil, yet the enemy was outnumbering them heavily. "Melissa, you go. I'll be right behind you." The sound of Nathaniel's cursing voice let Dean whip around. His friends retreated downwards, but the enemy was at their heels. Nathaniel's upper arm showed blood, and Marilis dragged him closer as if they had some kind of argument. Then their supernatural friend pushed the cowboy away, taking both swords in the process. Dean knew what Marilis was doing. He was trying to hold them off. The demons were after him alone, and not his human companions. "Oh no, you won't." Kneeling on the ground, Dean placed both hands in front of him. He closed his eyes as his mind became one with nature. He could feel the footfalls of the attackers. He could hear Nathaniel arguing about leaving no man behind. He was the grass and the ground beneath, the air, even the water connecting to Death's lair. The pain in his head became stronger, but he pushed on. Deeper and deeper into the earth he went, until he found the ghostly greenish spark that was creating this realm. Death's essence mixed with his own. He felt the entity's power and wisdom, but also loneliness. He sent a silent apology for intruding before unleashing whatever Death's magic might grant him. He heard the sudden shrieks of terror being abruptly silenced and the breaking of multiple bones at once. Just as he wanted to look up, time seemed to stop dead. His heart struggled to beat as the pain exploded in his mind even stronger than before. Around him, light and dark became one. Sounds were drowned out by his own rushing blood. His lungs burned like fire, whilst his limbs seemed to have turned to lead. He felt how his stomach churned and emptied the remnants of his last meal on the grass in front of him. "Dean!" Different voices called out to him. "Dean, was that him?" He felt how something lifted him from the ground. Fragments of sentences uttered by muffled voices filled his ears. He remembered floating through the air. Or was that just a dream? Then someone cried out again. It was the voice of a woman, but it grew faint. Why did it grow faint? He didn't want to leave her. "Don't leave. Come back." He wanted to yell, but he had no voice. Something cold and dark took hold of his soul. He could sense it. A sinister presence was ripping him away from the warm place. Dread filled him, for he knew somehow that he was defenseless in the face of his captor. Mind and body struggled to stay conscious, struggled to be part of the waking world. And then, nothing.